Early spring's my favourite time of year. The days are getting longer, nature's bursting into life, and there's still so much more to come. Set yourself up for a stonking growing season with this month's gardening jobs. We've got plenty to plant, supports to set up, and a battle cry in the war against weeds. It's warmer now, and even in the last 10 days or so, I've noticed growth starting to pick up. Hurrah! And with growth picking up, so does the need for watering. Check seedlings and plants wherever they are growing, especially under cover in like a greenhouse where obviously it doesn't rain. Now I just like to lift pots up and check the weight, and if they're quite light, that's a good indication they need some water, so I can go ahead and do that. Spring brings mild weather that surges plant growth, but don't get lulled into a false sense of security. In many areas, including mine, there's still plenty of scope for a frost. Bring cold-sensitive seedlings and plants into the house if a frost threatens. Most cold season vegetables will be absolutely fine as they are, but you may want to cover recent transplants or very young seedlings to keep them snug in really cold snaps with something like a fleecy row cover. I prefer to let the old stems of herbaceous perennials just kind of sit through the winter. Now you could argue it looks a bit of a straggly mess, and I'm not going to disagree with you there, but I take comfort from the fact that these old stems here are providing a valuable home for overwintering bugs. If I was to cut and remove these too soon, then I would have far fewer beneficial bugs like pollinators and pest predators around. So leaving it intact over winter is really important. However, I can now see that young growth is beginning to push through quite strongly, so I think it's a good time to just come through and cut things back. You can use your pruners, but in most cases the old stems can just snap off like this. Now these can go onto the compost heap, but I prefer simply to snap them up into smaller bits like that and then just kind of leave them around the plants so that any bugs still caught in there can have the time to move out in their old time. Now this still looks a bit of a mess, but in a few weeks with all the new growth, all of the old stems will be covered, and meanwhile they'll be rotting down to improve the soil where they fell. It's also time to tidy up herb growing areas as well. And I've got all this old growth here, and I can see the young growth down below here. So I'm just going to cut back all the old, straggly, tired growth to let the new stuff come through and flourish. There's a few weeds as well, so I'm going to go through and snag those up as well. There's a little bit of a gap here between this parsley and these pots of mint here, and I've got these parsley plants that I started off last year from a grocery store parsley that I simply split into 4 and grew on. Now parsley's really, really hardy, and once it flowers is fantastic for insects as well, so let's get these guys in to finish off. Over here, I know I've got some chives in here, so I'm just going to peel back this mulch a bit to help them come through, otherwise they might be a little bit swamped. You may notice the grass at last starting to grow again. Very fresh, beautiful lime green foliage is the sign that the growing season has well and truly begun. Now, of course, the timing of this will depend on where you are in the world, but for me, it's time for that first cut. Now the first cut is the most delicate one. We don't want to go too low, otherwise we might shock the grass and give moss an advantage, and that'll creep and spread. So what I'm going to do for my first cut is rise it up to the highest possible setting. Then as the weather picks up and warms up even more and growth picks up, I can drop it down in stages until I'm at my usual cut height. Let's see if it starts. It's time to show my alliums, onions and shallots, a bit of attention. Now these guys were sown from seed about a month ago and they're coming along nicely. I'll plant them out in about a couple of weeks. But over here, you can see I've got my autumn planted onions really coming along nicely, and my autumn planted shallots. Now, I planted these in the autumn to get a head start, but as you can see, they are absolutely raring to get out. Just look at those roots bursting through. So let's get them planted. But before that, oh, it smells so good. Love it. I'm popping them into this bed here, which gets plenty of sunshine. And I know that alliums have done really well here in the past. Now, this is going into a bed that's had plenty of garden compost added. It's a little bit twiggy actually, but this isn't a problem because these guys are already well away, so they won't get interrupted by that. Now for spacing, I'm going between 6 to 8 inches, which is 15 to 20 centimeters apart in kind of both directions on a grid formation. And then once I've got them all laid out, I can go on and plant them and then water to settle. Now, shallots and onions have very strappy leaves, which means that they can easily get overwhelmed by weeds. So I'll need to kind of hoik them out as I see them carefully to not disturb them. If you didn't get a chance to sow onions earlier on, then now is the perfect time to buy onion sets or starts. Just get them out at the same spacing as they are here, leaving the very tips of the sets proud of the soil surface. I have to say, all this beautifully fresh leafy growth against the chocolatey compost here just looks magnificent. This is what spring is all about. Cauliflowers are another vegetable I started in the autumn, and these have now reached a really beautiful size and are good to go out. They will be spaced about 18 inches or 45 centimeters apart in both directions in this bed. And I've already added lots of organic matter here to help improve the soil, so we're good to go. Now it's still quite early in the season, and anything that isn't covered, particularly brassicas like this, will get decimated by those pigeons. So I put in place this little tunnel structure here, and I'm just going to keep some netting over while they establish. This can probably come off in another month or so once there's more food around for the pigeons to enjoy rather than my cauliflowers. Early spring is the perfect time of year to start off a new strawberry bed. You will find ready to go strawberry plants in nurseries and garden centres, but do look out for bare root runners as well, which offer excellent value for money. Do check out our recent strawberry masterclass, where I discuss what types of strawberries to grow and discuss options for growing in both beds and containers, and I will link to that below. It's time to finish prep for all my indoor fruiting plants like tomatoes and cucumbers. So first up is just to top up the ground with a little bit more organic matter to feed those plants. Soil prep needs to be done as a priority, but the next thing doesn't really need to be done at any point, anytime particularly soon, but I like to get ahead anyway by setting up supports for my vining plants like my cucumbers and tomatoes. Now last year I had stonking success with cucumbers, so I'm looking forward to growing them again. So I'm setting in place my jute string here. It's really tough, strong stuff, and I'm going to set the supports about 18 inches or 45 centimeters apart. Now if you look closely, you can see that it's really kind of hairy stuff here, and I reckon that helps the vines to kind of grip hold of it and support their weight as they pull themselves upwards. So it's attached to really strong, thick gauge horizontal wire running across. Then I've just let it drop down here. Now when I come to plant, I will weave this underneath the root ball to sort of hold it nice and taut. So I'm going to allow another couple of feet extra length there of the string to enable that, and then just leave it there till I'm ready to plant next month. Perennial weeds like nettles and bindweed never seem much of a problem during the winter because you can't really see them. They've died back down for the year, but by spring they will be raising their hideous heads once more. Get ahead of the curve by declaring war on weeds. Loosen up the soil around these weeds and just pull up any trailing rhizomes to knock back the weeds a bit. I like to knock the nettles back a few feet so they don't swamp the plants that I'm trying to grow, like these raspberries here. Now, I don't want to eradicate nettles entirely because they're a really valuable food plant for caterpillars of moths and butterflies, many different species. So I like to keep them around the edge, but not too far forward. Like everything in gardening, it's about taking a pragmatic approach. And don't forget to remove annual weeds as they start to pop up as well. Just keep skimming over any unused soil like this to slice them off, ready for when you are going to sow or plant. Enjoy this moment of promise, and don't forget to take a step back from time to time to admire all of your handiwork. Even gardeners need a rest occasionally. I'll catch you next time.